Welcome back to Snail Story. Have you ever believed that a mute little girl, a pair of homeless twins, and a lonely man who once walked away from the world could come together to form a choir? Not on a grand stage, but in a dusty old cabin, surrounded by desert winds and wounds that never quite healed. Today's story is about Elias, a man who thought he had nothing left to lose, and three children who believed they had no one left to trust. They found each other in the freezing wind, through whispered songs, and built a home not with bricks, but with fragile melodies. And when the outside world tried to tear them apart, it was the children's song that became the most powerful plea: to stay together. If you believe music can heal, then stay with me until the very end of this journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so Snail Story can keep sharing healing tales. Slow, but true to the heart. The Arizona desert doesn't welcome anyone gently this time of year. Wind rose sharply from the scar-like cracks in the earth, sweeping up red dust that blurred the sky into a reddish haze. Elias Monroe sat behind the wheel of his old pickup truck, gripping it tightly as each gust made the vehicle shudder. The right window hadn't closed properly in years. He'd taped an oilcloth over it, but sand still found its way in through every crevice. It didn't matter. Dust and sand were part of him now, like silence, like the shadow of something lost long ago. He had just finished repairing a water pipeline for a small outpost 10 miles from home. An empty thermos rolled on the passenger seat, knocking dully with every jolt. The sky darkened quickly. The dust storm had arrived earlier than forecast. But Elias was used to living against the grain. His truck slowly rounded a familiar bend, once a resting place for old pilgrimage caravans. Now, it was nothing more than a rusted water tank and crumbling walls of a long-defunct pump station. That's when he saw it. A flicker of movement at the corner of his eye. A flash of white cloth rising, then falling. Then, an arm. Tiny. Desperate. Elias slammed the brakes. Dust spiraled up like a crashing wave. He jumped out of the truck and ran toward the collapsed water tank. The wind slapped his face. Sand coated his lips. His eyes stung, but he could see them clearly. Two small girls huddled in the ruins, hair tangled, clutching each other like lifelines in a storm. One of the girls looked up. Her eyes didn't just show fear, they held a fierce, practiced vigilance, the kind children wear after being pushed into darkness too many times to still believe in kindness. "Don't call the police," the girl said, her voice cracking from dryness. "We're just hiding here for a bit." Elias didn't ask. He took off his outer coat and wrapped it around both girls. "Get in the truck. A sandstorm's coming fast. We need a safe place." The girls hesitated. One, slightly braver, stood first. The other clung tightly to her sister's hand, but eventually nodded. Inside the truck, Elias adjusted the heater. Warm air began to circulate through the cab. He handed each girl a small bottle of water. They drank quickly, as if they couldn't believe their luck. "What are your names?" Elias asked, his voice gentle, as if it might shatter. "I'm Nova. This is my sister, Celine," the older girl replied. "We're twins, 9.5. Elias gave a faint smile. 9.5, huh? Very precise. Nova nodded. "Mama says odd numbers bring luck." Elias paused. "Where's your mom?" Silence from Celine. Nova lowered her eyes. "She's gone. And our uncle, he's not a good man. We don't want to go back there." A weary sigh pressed through Elias's chest. His past work repairing water systems and orphan shelters had introduced him to stories like this. Stories that, if no one stepped in, would end up as tragic headlines in the local paper by the time they arrived home. Darkness had fully fallen. Elias's cabin lay tucked behind a low hill, backed against the golden rock ranges. He pushed open the door and flicked on the light. The familiar scent of pine wood and beeswax filled the space. The house was silent, not because it lacked people, but because Tessa hadn't spoken in over 2 years. Tessa sat by the window, reading beneath the desk lamp. 13 years old, her long brown hair draped over her shoulders, her eyes quiet, but not vacant. As Elias entered with 2 unfamiliar children, Tessa looked up. No surprise, no fear. Just a gaze that lingered slightly longer than usual, and that, to Elias, was a small miracle. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Tessa didn't reply. She simply nodded, then looked at the twins. "This is Nova and Celine. They'll be staying for a while if that's all right." Tessa looked at the girls. Nova gave a small wave. "Hi." Celine stayed quiet, clinging to the hem of her sister's shirt. Tessa didn't respond, but she didn't turn away either. She stood, walked to the kitchen, pulled out a few packets of instant cocoa, set them on the table. Then quietly returned to her seat and resumed reading. Elias stood still, surprised. Tessa had never prepared anything for guests before, never done anything without being asked. But something in her expression now seemed to say, "I understand." He walked over, poured hot water into the cups, placed them gently in front of the 3 girls. "We don't need to say much tonight," Elias said, his voice low. "Let's just get warm." And so the house fell into silence again, filled only by the sound of spoons stirring cocoa and the soft, steady rhythm of 3 quiet breaths, weaving together like the unspoken opening to a new story. Mornings in the desert were never noisy. Just the soft whistle of wind brushing past cactus branches, the neighbors' hens crowing a little too late, and the light creak of cautious footsteps on the cabin's old wooden floor. Elias woke early. As always, he lit the stove, boiled water, and prepared a simple breakfast, cornmeal cakes with honey. He wasn't much of a talker, especially in the mornings. But today, seeing the 3 girls quietly gathered on the living room rug, Tessa sitting cross-legged, doodling absent-mindedly, while Nova and Celine whispered about something, he felt that the air in the house had changed. It wasn't the same heavy silence that had filled the place for the past 2 years. This was something different, a kind of peace, like land after rain. No flowers yet, but soft again. "Breakfast's ready," he called gently. All 3 girls came out. The twins politely thanked him. Tessa said nothing but followed them and sat at the table like it was the most natural thing. Elias couldn't help but smile, just a little. During breakfast, Nova suddenly asked, "Mr. Elias, does that old organ still work?" Elias glanced toward the corner of the house where a dusty old electric keyboard had sat unused since. His wife passed, probably. "Haven't turned it on in a long time. Can I try it?" Nova tilted her head. Elias nodded. "Just be careful. That thing has a personality." Nova giggled, tugging her sister's hand. "Come on." The twins tiptoed toward it. Celine hesitated for a moment, then followed. Tessa stayed at the table, eyes watching closely. A soft click echoed as Nova pushed the power button. A small red light blinked on. A few static hisses, then silence. Nova pressed a few keys. A raspy note rang out. Then a sharp high C each. Note sounded like it was waking up memories embedded deep in the wooden walls. No one said anything. Then, Nova began playing a simple melody, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," slow, slightly off-key, but sincere. Celine stood beside her and began to sing. Her voice was tiny, hoarse from cold, but soothing, like someone gently blowing dust off an old stone. Tessa didn't move, but her eyes were wide, so focused that Elias could feel her breath from where he stood. When the song ended, Celine turned to her sister. "Can you play You Are My Sunshine next?" Nova smiled softly. "Just the first part. You sing." Tessa stood up unexpectedly, not in a rush, but with a slow, cautious step, as if she herself wasn't sure what she was doing. She walked toward the keyboard, didn't interrupt, just sat down on the wooden bench opposite it, hands folded tightly in her lap. Nova noticed and smiled. "Want to sing with us, Tessa?" The question made Celine glance around, confused. Tessa didn't respond. But she didn't walk away either. Nova began playing. The notes were hesitant, tender, more of an invitation than a performance. Celine began to sing again, even softer than before. Elias stood by the kitchen door, gripping his ceramic mug, not from the cold, but afraid that the fragile moment might shatter. Then, something extraordinary happened. A whisper of a sound, so soft it barely existed. But it had melody. Tessa. Single quotes, us. Voice, she didn't sing a full line, just a faint hum at the end of the verse. But it was enough to make Nova stop playing. Celine looked up, no one said a word. Tessa kept her eyes down, cheeks flushed, hands clenched tight into her shirt. But that voice had been real. Not imagined. Elias gripped the mug tighter, his fingers trembling. He stepped out of the kitchen, walked to the window, and looked away. Because he knew if he looked at her now, even just a little, that miracle might retreat like water slipping back into the desert. He stood still, eyes closed. "Tessa," Nova whispered. "You sing beautifully." Tessa didn't reply. But for the first time, she nodded. That night, after the girls had gone to sleep, Elias sat alone at the kitchen table. He reached up to the high shelf and pulled down a small wooden box, old, with a cassette player and built-in microphone, the kind his wife once used to record lullabies. He hadn't touched it since she died. But tonight, he set it down, wiped off the dust, opened the lid, and pressed play. A woman's voice filled the room, clear and gentle. Then a tiny child's voice, surely Tessa's from long ago, chiming in, babbling along. Elias sat there. He didn't cry, but he never let go of the cassette player, as if by holding on tight enough, the sounds wouldn't slip away again. He didn't dare to hope too much, but for the first time in a long while, he thought, maybe, the voice would return, not like magic, but like a seed beginning to sprout beneath the sand. The next morning, the small cabin in the desert woke up bathed in golden sunlight, filtering through a thin veil of dust. The air carried the scent of dry wood and slightly burnt cornmeal cakes. Elias was up early, as usual, but for the first time in years, as he made coffee, he found himself softly humming an old melody. Not quite music, not fully attuned, but still. It was sound. He didn't notice that Tessa was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching him with quiet surprise. She said nothing, simply pulled out a chair and sat at the table. Elias paused when he saw her, but didn't ask. He just poured her a cup of warm milk. Nova and Celine came in next, their hair still messy, arms clutching to worn-out fabric. "Dolls." "Uncle Elias," Nova began, "can we clean up the backyard today? There's a flat patch where we could build a mini stage." "A stage?" Elias raised an eyebrow, smiling faintly. "I thought," Nova explained, "we could practice singing like a real band, like the music teacher on YouTube says. We don't sing to perform, we sing to connect." Elias glanced at Tessa. She was quietly stirring her milk, showing no clear reaction. But when Nova turned and asked, "Tessa, will you sing too?" Tessa gently set down her spoon, stood up, and walked toward the dusty keyboard in the corner. She didn't speak, but it was an answer. That afternoon, under a sun pouring gold across the cracked earth, the three girls stood on a makeshift wooden platform Elias had laid over some old bricks. Nova stood in the middle, confident. Celine stayed close to her, sighed. Tessa sat on a stool beside the keyboard, fingers resting lightly on the keys. Elias sat quietly on the doorstep, an old guitar resting in his lap. He didn't strum, just held it. Like a metronome for something that had only just begun to take shape. "Let's try the song from yesterday," Nova whispered, glancing at Tessa. "You don't have to sing if you don't want to. Just hum along." Tessa nodded slightly. Nova began counting. 1, 2, 3, the singing started. Uneven, not musically perfect, but honest. Celine sang the first line, her voice trembling but sweet, like honey melting in water. Nova followed, holding her final note a bit long, then letting it fall gently like wind brushing through cactus thorns. Tessa didn't sing right away, but she closed her eyes, pressed her lips together, and joined with a thin, delicate low note. The three voices weren't loud. They weren't powerful. But together, they flowed like water through stone, soft but unstoppable. Elias held his breath. In that moment, he didn't see scars, loss, or years of silence. He saw something coming back to life, as light as drifting sand, as strong as a root clinging to the driest earth. That night, Elias sat restringing the old Taylor guitar, the one his wife used to play lullabies for Tessa every evening. His fingers tightened the strings as he thought of something Nova had said earlier. "We sing to connect." He glanced at the sofa where the three girls were fast asleep. Nova and Celine had their legs tangled together like twin cactus stems, growing from one root. Tessa lay nearby, not cuddled up, but also not facing the wall like she usually did. Her face was calm, no longer drawn with the tension of recent years. He suddenly remembered an old cassette tape stored in the shed. He rummaged for it, brushed off the dust, and found the one labeled Tessa, 3 years old, singing with Mom. He didn't play it, not because he feared the pain of memory, but because, for the first time, he felt that Tessa's voice today wasn't something left behind from the past. It was something new, something growing. And he wanted to let it rise on its own, unblended with anything that came before. The next morning, while Elias was boiling water, Tessa walked into the kitchen. There was nothing unusual about her stride, but the ease in her steps caught his attention. "Want some cornmeal cakes?" he asked, as he did every day. She didn't answer, but for the first time, she didn't sit alone. Tessa grabbed 2 plates and set them on the table, one for herself, one for someone else. Just then, Nova and Celine walked in. Nova exclaimed, "Tessa saved us some." Elias smiled, nodding slightly. He didn't say anything out loud, but inside, he knew. Some progress doesn't need sound, it's just presence. That night, under the warm glow of the cabin light and the wind hissing softly through the window, the three girls sang again. This time, there was guitar accompaniment. Elias played gently. Just a few basic chords, enough to carry their whispered harmonies. Tessa started earlier than before. Nova let her little sister lead. Celine followed, her voice like a soft breath. Faint but vital dot, and then, amidst those imperfect words and fragile notes, Elias realized his daughter had come back to the world, not with words, but through music. That day was a Saturday, where Elias lived on the outskirts of Dustin. There was hardly anything resembling a schedule, but weekends always carried a certain hum of energy. School buses didn't pass. The repair shop at the edge of town opened later, and the kids, if there were any around, would run wild through the sandy yards, shouting about everything and nothing. Nova and Celine were no different. Except instead of running, they chose to start the day by sweeping the yard and wiping down the old keyboard. After every song came a round of laughter, and Tessa, though still silent, was now used to sitting between the 2 younger girls, gently tapping keys as if it was something she had always done. Elias watched from the kitchen window. Sometimes it still amazed him. 3 girls. 1 selectively mute, 2 homeless. And yet music had made them seem like 3 blades of grass growing on the same piece of land. But peace is always fragile. That afternoon, as Elias was replacing the brake pads on his old pickup, a black SUV pulled up suddenly in front of the gate. Dust swirled, clouding the windows. From the car, a man stepped out, clean-shaven, wearing a wrinkled suit and darting eyes. Elias had never seen him before, but Nova had. "Uncle Martin," she whispered, her face turning pale. Celine instantly hid behind her sister, blood drained. From her face, the man named Martin stared directly at Elias. "I'm the legal guardian of these two girls." Elias gripped his rag tighter, trying to keep his voice calm. "Then why'd you let them run off into a dust storm?" "That's none of your business," Martin snapped. "They're my nieces. I have the right to take them back." "I don't want to go," Celine cried out. "He locked me in a dark room." "Shut your mouth, you little brat," Martin shouted, stepping forward. Nova quickly shielded her. "Sister," her hands trembling. Tessa emerged from the house. No one noticed her at first, but she was watching Martin carefully, then glanced at the twins. Then, without a word, she ran back inside. Not to hide, but to find something. Martin sneered. "You're housing minors without reporting to the authorities. You know that's illegal, right?" Elias remained still. Then, slowly, he replied, "I do, but I also know there are things the law might miss that conscience never does." Martin stepped closer. Then suddenly music filled the air. It came from a small speaker on the windowsill. Tessa had plugged in the old cassette player and rewound to a section Elias had once planned to listen to. But this time, it wasn't. His wife's voice, it was the voices of the three girls. A clumsy recording with Celine singing softly in the night. Tessa's hesitant keyboard notes and Nova counting the beat. Martin froze. "What the hell is that?" "Proof," Elias said, "that here the girls are alive. Singing, not locked away, not beaten." Martin's face flushed red. "You have no right, and you no longer have any rights if I send this recording to Child Protective Services." Martin fell silent. Celine began to cry, but for the first time, she didn't hide. She lifted her head and stared straight at her uncle with the eyes of someone who finally knew she belonged somewhere. The SUV drove off in a cloud of red dust. No one said a word the whole time. It was Tessa who closed the door. She turned to Elias, not smiling, not afraid, but with a look that said clearly, "I will protect my friends." Elias placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Well done." Nova sat down on the porch step. Celine joined her, eyes still red. After a long pause, Nova whispered, "I thought he was going to take me away. I thought I'd have to leave the first place that ever felt like home." Elias sat beside her. "Home isn't a place no one finds. It's where, even when someone shows up, we choose to protect each other." Celine looked up. "Can we still stay?" Tessa said nothing. But she went inside, brought out an old piece of cloth, and laid it over Celine's shoulders like a blanket. That was the answer. That night, Elias checked every door and window carefully. He knew Martin might return. But for the first time, he didn't feel afraid, because now this house had three voices, and all of them were finally speaking. Desert nights were colder than most people imagined. The wind didn't howl. It crept like thin fingers slipping through old window cracks. Inside the wooden cabin, the soft yellow light melted into shadows like warm beeswax. Tessa wasn't sleeping. She sat on the floor, back resting against the sofa, legs curled up. In her hands was a wrinkled sketchbook, its pages filled with smudged pencil marks, worn from being pressed too hard and erased too many times. Most of the drawings were incomplete. A cat with no face, a woman holding a guitar, a house with smoke rising from the chimney, but no door. Nova walked out of the room and noticed Tessa still awake. She said nothing, just quietly sat down beside her. A long moment passed before Nova whispered, Did you used to sing when your mom was still alive? Tessa didn't answer, but her eyes lingered on the drawing of the woman in the sketchbook. Nova continued softly, "We were locked in the storage shed for a long time. When I was scared, I'd sing a song in my head. Like You Are My Sunshine or Silent Night. Celine would just hold on to me. She never said a word. Back then, I didn't know if I sang in tune. I just needed something warmer than the dark." Tessa blinked slowly. Then, suddenly, she flipped to a blank page in her sketchbook. With trembling hands, she drew 3 figures, one small, 2 larger. One with long hair, singing. The small one sat nearby, hands covering their ears. The third stood in the back, face smudged from being erased too many times. Nova didn't understand at all, but she didn't ask. She simply said, gently, "I get it. Sometimes singing doesn't save you, but you're still here." That means something of it stayed. Tessa gave the faintest nod the next morning. Elias rose early and found the 2 girls still fast asleep. On the rug, he stepped quietly outside, sat on the porch, and opened his small notebook, the one where he scribbled reflections from each night. Today, the first line he wrote was, "Tessa drew her mother. No face." But there was music, he remembered. The nights he used to hold that old guitar while Tessa, still tiny, clung to her mother like a shadow. When his wife died, a sudden accident on her way to teach a music class, Tessa hadn't cried. She just sat there, hands over her ears, eyes wide and unblinking. And after that day, she stopped singing, stopped speaking, stopped meeting anyone's eyes. Elias had tried everything. Therapy, parenting books. But the more he tried, the deeper Tessa seemed to retreat into herself. Now, he wasn't trying anymore. He had stepped back, letting Nova and Celine do something adults couldn't, enter Tessa's world with the small, soft honesty of children. That day, the 3 girls decided to build a recording studio in the living room. Just a few. Blankets strung up, a pretend microphone made from a cardboard tube, and Elias's phone as the recorder. But they were serious about it, assigning roles, rehearsing. Even designing a group logo with colored markers, 3 music notes on a desert backdrop with the name, The Dust Choir. Tessa didn't help with the logo. But when Nova suggested, "Maybe you can draw the cover for our first album," she looked at her for a long time, then nodded, as softly as wind brushing a sheet of tin. That evening, the trio recorded their first song, Lean on Me. Nova sang lead, Celine did the harmonies. Tessa played the keyboard. When they finished the first take, Elias replayed it. The sound echoed gently through the dim room, sometimes warped, sometimes too loud, but it was still music. Tessa slipped away to a corner, hugging her sketchbook. An hour later, when everyone had fallen asleep, Elias happened to glance over and saw the notebook open to a new page. It was a drawing of the 3 girls standing in the middle of the desert, the wooden cabin behind them, and soft pencil. Waves of music floating above their heads. Tessa had drawn herself smiling. That night, Elias sat on the porch for a long time. He knew miracles didn't arrive all at once, but what he had just seen was real. A child, once pulled into the deepest silence, was now slowly writing her voice back into the world. He looked up at the stars and whispered the words his wife had said long ago, "We don't need to sing loudly. We just need to sing truthfully." Monday began with its familiar calm. Nova tied Celine's hair with a scrap of fabric. Tessa wiped the keyboard gently with a warm cloth. And Elias stood in the kitchen, roasting corn kernels on an old cast-iron pan. None of them knew that. At that very moment, a 42-second video clip was beginning to go viral on social media. The previous week, during one of their trial recordings, Nova had secretly set up a phone to capture the 3 of them singing Lean on Me. It wasn't a perfect take. Nova ran out of breath near the end. Celine was offbeat, and Tessa hit a few wrong notes. But the way the golden sunset poured in through the back window, their trembling yet sincere voices, and the burst of laughter. At the end, so real, so warm, struck something deep in those who watched. Nova hadn't planned to post it. But yesterday, when Elias jokingly said, "If I get famous because of you three, I'll thank you with cornbread for a week," she decided to send the clip to an old friend on a music forum. From there, everything took flight like dust on the wind. That afternoon, Elias received a text from an unknown number. "Are you the man in the choir in the Dust video? We'd like to know more about the girls." Requesting an interview. Elias frowned. He hadn't shared anything publicly. But when he checked online, he saw it. The little video had been shared over 30,000 times, with comments like, "Imperfect voices, but they made me cry. Who are these girls? Look at the one on the keyboard, a miracle in the desert. Where are they? Do they need help?" Elias wasn't sure what to feel. Pride? Confusion? Worry? That evening, the girls were thrilled to learn the video had been loved by so many. Nova even joked, "Should we make band t-shirts now? Fans of Dust Choir can wear sandy shirts." Celine beamed. "Someone said I sound like an angel." As for Tessa, she said nothing. But in her sketchbook, she drew something new. Three of them standing on a dusty stage, crowd of faceless circles below, glowing with light. But not all attention brings joy. The next morning, a news van from a local reporter parked at the end of the dirt road leading to the cabin. Elias stepped outside and blocked their path. "Sorry, this is private property." A middle-aged woman flashed a press badge. "We just want to ask a few questions about the trending video. Is it true that 3 girls live here? Are they really homeless, as some sources claim?" Elias said nothing, then firmly replied, "No comment. Please leave." When they didn't back down, Elias turned and walked into the house. Nova had seen it all, her face shifting from surprise to guilt. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I only sent it to a friend." "I didn't think." Elias gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not angry. I just want you to be safe." A few days later, a package arrived, no sender listed. Inside were 3 toy microphones, 3 old headphones, and a handwritten note in careful script. "To the little angels in the desert wind. Thank you for singing what this world so badly needed to hear again. Whatever pain you've carried, please believe your voice can heal yourself and others too." Someone who once feared to sing Celine burst into tears after reading it. Nova pressed the headphones to her ears like they were treasure. And Tessa, for the first time, smiled openly, right in front of Elias. But amid the joy, something else had begun to crack. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Elias quietly checked his old email inbox. A new message appeared. The subject line read, "Inquiry regarding the 3 girls in the video. Urgent verification required sender. A child welfare organization." News of Tessa singing again spread faster than Elias expected, not through the press, nor on social media, but through the young social worker who had quietly wiped away tears, while listening to a voice crack open from a girl long believed to be silent forever. 2 days later, the Child Welfare Agency sent a notice. "We will postpone any formal decisions to continue assessing this special case." Not a promise, but a spark of hope. As for Elias, instead of feeling relief, he found himself entering a different kind of battle, one with something long buried inside him. That morning, after feeding the 3 girls, Elias drove alone to a neighboring town. He stopped in front of an old building, the former county courthouse, a place he had walked into 8 years ago, to sign away guardianship of his younger brother. Elias's brother, a failed street musician, had spiraled into addiction after their mother's death. At the time, Elias was a grieving husband, lost, angry at the world. He had once said, I can't save anyone anymore, not even my own brother. And he hadn't. His brother went missing 5 years ago. Rumors said he died of an overdose in San Bernardino, but no body was ever found. Nova and Celine were his brother's children. Elias wasn't certain. But when he looked into their eyes, he knew he'd seen them before in old photos. In the way Levi's eyes looked when he played guitar on their childhood rooftop, Elias had never asked. Nova had never told him. But now, to have the legal right to keep the girls, he would have to claim them, not just with his heart, but with the law. That afternoon, back at home, Elias opened the drawer of an old wooden desk. Inside was a yellowed envelope, sealed. He had never opened it. It was a letter from his brother, sent before he disappeared. His hand shook as he unfolded it. "Dear Elias, if you're reading this, I might not be around anymore. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know I tried. But the music in my head is too loud and I don't know how to silence it. I left the girls with their nanny and told her I'd come back. But I knew I wouldn't have the courage. If you can, if you're willing, please find them. Don't let them lose their voice like I did. Nova has mom's eyes, and Celine sings like an angel. Please, if there's any corner left in your heart, hold on to what I couldn't." Your brother, Levi. Elias clutched the letter. Tears spilled onto the worn page. That night, Elias called the girls into the living room. "I need to tell you something," he said, "about your real father, Nova." And Celine looked at each other, stunned. Tessa sat quietly, eyes wide. "Your dad was my brother," Elias said softly. "His name was Levi." Nova whispered, "Then you're your uncle. But I should have found you sooner. I ran away from it." Celine's voice trembled. "About our mom?" Elias bowed his head. "She passed away when you were very little. Levi tried to care for you both, but he couldn't manage. I don't know if I deserve it, but I want to ask to be allowed to keep you, not just legally. Because for a while now, you've already been part of this home." Nova didn't answer. She simply stepped forward and hugged Elias tightly. Celine sobbed, "You've always held on to what our dad couldn't." Tessa pulled out a scrap of paper and quickly drew the three of them, hugging. Above their heads, in soft pencil, she wrote, "It's never too late to become family." That night, Elias wrote a letter to the Child Welfare Agency. He revealed the whole truth, enclosed Levi's letter, and added one request. "I don't want to keep the girls out of pity, but because I already lost one person and I can't lose 3 more. He knew the decision wasn't his to make, but for the first time in years, he felt truly ready to hold on to something and never let go. That morning, Elias woke up very early. He sat by the window, holding a cup of cold coffee, gazing out at the gray-gold desert slowly fading under the soft light of dawn. Today was the hearing with the Child Welfare Court, the one that would decide whether the 3 girls could stay in this cabin. Nova hadn't slept since midnight. She paced back and forth in the room, glancing outside every few minutes, as if looking far enough might make the worries disappear. Celine sat silently by the keyboard, not playing. Her hands simply rested on the keys, as though waiting for some signal to lift her up. Tessa behaved differently that morning. She cut a piece of paper into 3 small hearts, one red, one yellow, and one blue. Then she carefully placed them in an old cookie tin, along with a drawing, the cabin, a guitar. 3 children and an adult gathered around a lamp. Above it, in slow, deliberate handwriting, "This is home, and home has music." By noon, a car brought Elias and the 3 girls to the small town hall. The meeting room was modest, with a round table and only 6 people. 1 judge, 2 social workers, a community lawyer, Elias, and the girls seated beside him. The judge began. "With a neutral tone, we have received supplemental materials from Mr. Elias. including a handwritten letter from the children's biological father, and documents showing the current care environment. However, we must also consider that Mr. Elias has no legal guardianship papers and had previously declined custody of a family member. Elias didn't argue. He simply nodded. I ran from responsibility, but I'm here now, not with words, but with action. The lawyer beside him sighed. Without official adoption papers, no matter how good the intentions, the outcome may not be in your favor. Celine clung tightly to Elise's sleeve. Nova stayed silent, staring ahead. Tessa quietly opened the cookie tin and placed it on the table. The judge looked in. 3 paper hearts and a crude, heartfelt drawing. He raised an eyebrow. This is... Tessa stepped forward. She gently dragged a wooden chair to the center of the room, climbed up, hands on the microphone, and began to sing not a familiar song. A new one she had written just for today. The lyrics weren't complete, but the melody was there. And the eyes? The first line came out soft. If you take the walls away, please leave the light that we made inside. Her voice was still delicate, but no longer shaky. Nova stood and joined her. If you move the roof above, please let the song stay with the dust. Celine stepped forward, her voice rising. You can call it temporary, you can name it lost, but we called it home. When the last line faded, the room was completely silent. The judge didn't speak. The social worker removed her glasses, wiping her eyes. A deep voice rose from the back. I don't know much about the law. Tess, if this isn't family, then what is? It was Mr. Hank, the old man from town who had once brought rice to Elias last year, now standing quietly at the back. Behind him was the diner owner, the town librarian, a local medic. All of them had heard the song online and found out today was a decision day. They didn't hold signs, didn't chant, they simply stood behind the glass wall of the hearing room like a silent choir. Finally, the judge put pen to paper. 1 second, 2.32. He looked up, his eyes slightly misty. The court grants temporary guardianship to Mr. Elias Whitlock for a term of 6 months. During that time, he will complete formal adoption procedures with the assistance of the Community Legal Office. Nova hugged Celine tight, and both of them squeezed Elias in turn. Tessa didn't speak, but smiled clearer than ever before. The song they had sung hadn't just saved a house, had saved 3 little hearts. That night, the wooden cabin glowed brighter than it ever had. They turned on every light, played music, ate popcorn, laughed and sang like tomorrow didn't exist. Elias strummed his guitar. Nova scribbled down lyrics to a new song, Paper Hearts and Dust Choir, a hymn for those who once believed they belonged nowhere. And Tessa, while no one was watching, added a new line to her old drawing. Sometimes home is not where we're born. It's where someone hears us sing. 3 months after the court's temporary ruling, the old wooden cabin on the edge of the desert bore a new name. Painted in white across the front wall, Dust Choir Home. It wasn't a community center, not a foster home, and certainly not a glamorous charity project, just a home, and a handmade stage built from discarded planks found at the town's junkyard. Elias, once a man wrapped in solitude, was now woken each morning by 3 voices. Nova, did you make coffee yet, Uncle? Celine, can I pick the outfit for the band today? And Tessa, still the quietest, but always knocking twice on his door. Like a morning greeting, the official adoption process was nearly complete. The small town they lived in now knew of Dust Choir as a symbol of something unexpected, that, in the middle of dust and silence, something beautiful could bloom if someone was patient enough to listen. Their first concert was held in the open lot behind the cabin. No foldable chairs, no stage lights, just old burlap sacks for cushions, borrowed speakers from the local electronics shop, and twinkling string lights wrapped around wooden poles, like arms hugging the night. The whole town came. The elderly little kids, the bookstore clerk, the mailman, even the vet and Mr. Hank, who brought along his dog, June. Elias stepped onto the stage first. He didn't give a long speech, just said one thing. Music once saved me from a numb life, and these 3 children taught me how to live again. Now it's their turn to speak through song. Nova stepped up with the mic in hand, beaming at the audience. I'm Nova. This is my sister, Celine. And that's Tessa. She sings better with her eyes than anyone I know. Celine added, we never went to music school, but we have Uncle Elias. And he believes that if a child can sing their sorrow out loud, they'll eventually find joy echoed back. Tessa said nothing. She just bowed and took her seat at the keyboard. They began with the first song ever recorded in the cabin, Lean on Me. Then moved to an original song written by Nova, Paper Hearts, about fragile hearts that thought they'd break easily, but turned out surprisingly resilient when loved. Finally, they performed a special harmony piece, Celine leading vocals, Nova harmonizing, and Tessa on piano. The song had no title, only melody, just like their journey, label-free, but full of truth. When the final note drifted into silence, no one moved. A beat dot, then the first clap, then another. Then the whole open yard erupted. Celine hugged Nova, and both of them pulled Tessa in. For the first time, Tessa laughed out loud, a hoarse, barely formed sound, but it was a laugh. Her first in years. Elias, standing behind the stage, turned away to wipe his eyes. After that night, Dust Choir received invitations to sing at churches, the small school, and even surprisingly, a television program. But Elias told the kids, we don't sing to be famous. We sing to keep the home. Nova said, if one day we go far, I want to bring the cabins would sign with us. So no matter where we are, we'll remember we once sang in a place that had nothing except trust. On the day they received the official guardianship papers, Elias took the kids back to the hill behind the cabin. The 3 held hands as they walked. He pulled out a photo, a young man with a wooden guitar, sitting on a rooftop, his younger brother, Levi. Elias placed the picture gently on the earth and whispered, see this? You couldn't hold on to the music, but your daughters did, and they've carried it further than we ever imagined. That evening, in the cabin, the 4 gathered around the wood stove again. Celine added to the old drawing, a bus with 3 tiny shadows inside. Driving across the desert, Nova scribbled new lyrics on the corner. This choir was born in the dust, but it sings for the world. Tessa drew a small, smiley face. This time, no one needed to guess what it meant. Elias looked at it all and smiled. No mansion, no fame, just a song. And each other. Thank you for listening to today's story. In a world that moves faster each day, we sometimes forget. A true home isn't made of high walls or material wealth, but of someone who listens. A hand that reaches out when you're tired, and eyes that see you without judgment. The choir in the dust isn't just the journey of 3 children and a lonely man. It's proof that where kindness exists, hope remains. That every child, no matter where they come from, how long they've been silent, or how many times they've been left behind, deserves to be loved, to be seen, and to be held on to. Not because they're special, but because they're human. We can't change each other's pasts, but we can choose how we show up in the present, with a little compassion, a little patience, and a whole lot of humanity. Thank you for staying until the end with Snail Story. If you, like us, believe that one person who truly cares can save a life, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Every story you share is a small light, rekindling hope where it once seemed gone.